Victoria Pearson, but you can call me V. And now this might seem a little bit out of character to you, but I subscribe to Arnold Schwarzenegger's newsletter, which is called The Daily Pump. Now I did start subscribing to it when I was really into heavy lifting, before my shoulder injury, when I could actually do stuff. But I've kept subscribed even though I can't do the heavy lifting anymore, purely because I find his newsletter really positive, and he also does some really interesting articles on various different things that are in the news at the moment that are to do with health and wellness and stuff like that. One of the emails that I got this morning, I think it was, so Friday, he wrote about AI, and he cited a study in there which I then went and had a look at, and it was a really interesting study actually, although it was a very small study. There was only 54 participants in this study, so I do think that it would need to be redone to replicate the results before we can draw massive conclusions from it. But it was interesting what they found. They took these 56 people and they split them into 3 groups. The first group wrote an essay just using their brains. The second group wrote an essay just using their brains and a search engine to help them. And the third group just used a large language learning model. Now in Arnie's newsletter, he talks about that being ChatGPT, but when I had a look at the original study, I couldn't find which language learning model they actually used. And I think for it to be a fair test, you'd probably have to do it across multiple different LLMs to make sure that you get the same result each time. So they found that 83% of participants could not quote their essay just minutes after writing it with ChatGPT or similar. That didn't surprise me at all, because obviously your brain is not making those thoughts. The machine is making those thoughts for you. They haven't been through your brain and been written out by you. That's just something somebody else has said and you've barely listened to it. What was really interesting though about that study was that when they flipped the groups around and had the people who had been using large language models to write their essays write an essay just from their brains, those people didn't just underperform the first 2 groups that did that. They actually underperformed their own selves in a test essay from before the experiment started. So not only were they not as smart as the other participants after using this AI language model, they were also less smart than they had been 15 minutes before that, which is quite concerning, really. Now, I've often said that if we over-rely on too much tech, too much AI, too many things, that our brains are going to atrophy. It stands to reason to me. If, for example, you use a wheelchair all the time, you're not ambulatory at all, over time, your leg muscles will atrophy unless you do serious work to keep them in shape, because you're not using them anymore. And your body doesn't waste energy on maintaining things that you don't use. For that reason, I am very worried that our brains are going to atrophy if we carry on pretending that ChatGPT is your friend or your therapist, or just something to do all the work for you. And I'm actually getting to the point where now that my daughter's at university and I'm seeing how many students are using AI to pass their assignments, I don't think I ever want a doctor that graduated after this year. I want a doctor that's actually read the books, studied the papers and written their own essays, please. Maybe I'm just a bit of a Luddite, I don't know. But back in 2012, I wrote a story that was sort of about this. In my story, the internet was implanted into people's bodies at birth so that they can access the internet from birth. And we all thought that was a brilliant thing, and then in the story it wasn't such a great thing. Now that started off as a short story, then I turned it into a novel, then that novel turned into a trilogy, then I decided that actual real world technology like Neuralink and AI was overtaking what was in my tech dystopia, and the real world is far scarier than one that I can conjure from my own little brain, and so I kind of shelved it. But the short story exists online. It is on my website, which is currently down for reasons that I don't understand, probably because I'm bad-mouthing technology, so it's decided to get me back. It's also on my Patreon as this month's story. Even though it is an old one, it is a very old one, so I thought some of you might not have seen it yet. But I wrote this in 2012, and I'm going to read it to you today because I think that you might enjoy it. And if enough of you enjoy it, I might even go back and resurrect that trilogy and actually write it in a way that makes sense. Because I did start it in 2012, It's very different to how I would write now, so maybe it'll be an interesting experiment to take what I've learned in my writing craft so far and apply it to this story. But I thought I'd read you the short today that started it all off. So, if you're sitting comfortably, I'll begin. Showing my age with that line. So this story is called Before Digital Dreams. Come sit on Nana's knee, little one, and I'll tell you a story about when I was young. Back in the old days, before even my parents were born, they didn't have palm discs. They had no access to the hive mind at all. I mean, they thought their technology was cutting edge, they really did. But if they wanted to find out something or speak to someone that was further away than you are from me now, they had to use a machine. The machines started off all big and clunky. They were attached to the walls of the house with wires. You couldn't take them anywhere with you. They were useless, really. You had to read information off a screen and everything. It must have taken ages to learn things. But without them, we wouldn't have the advantages that we have today. Kind of like the candle being the forerunner to the electric light. Now, the more a person uses something, becomes accustomed to it, the more they tend to rely on it. It was that way with the forerunner of the palm disc, the mobile, I think they called it. People got fed up, I suppose, having to get to their home or place of work to be able to find out a fact or listen to a song or talk to someone in another part of the world. They began to create smaller and smaller devices to do the job, tiny versions of their home machines that ran on something called battery power, although don't ask me how that works because I've got no idea. All I know is, to keep the devices powered, they plundered the world's natural resources, polluted the air, poisoned the water. There were many more people back then, in cities a bit like ours, and small settlements called villages all over the globe. They were scattered across the entire planet, grouped into tribes and communities and peoples, not united to a few cities like we are. Imagine living so divided from people. Awful. They fought terrible wars over resources. The lucky few lived a life of luxury while the majority starved and suffered and died. So many human lives were lost in the great resource wars, it's hard to imagine the scale of loss. You'll learn more about that in your history downloads, I should think, when you're a little older. Killing each other over water and fuel and land like animals. Thank tech we've evolved from those dark times. Soon their technology had developed to the point where they could speak to people all over the globe, listen to whatever song they liked, find out any fact. They called their network the internet, but it was onerous compared to the hive mind. To find the exact thing you wanted took time and patience. People started to abuse it, use the network to humiliate and bully, to watch unsavoury things happening to less fortunate people. People got so used to hearing news of others suffering that they became desensitised to it. They decided that those less fortunate than them deserved their fate, that they had earned it through greed and laziness and unworthiness. The misinformation grew, distorting and magnifying with every retelling, turning people against each other, dividing people. The network turned from a positive, groundbreaking way of drawing people together to a dark underbelly of illegal and immoral behaviour. Even their rulers, the people in charge, used this internet to advantage themselves, waging great propaganda wars to ensure that they stayed in power. You see, there was no one group looking after us then. Every country had its own rules and regulations, but the world as a whole didn't as such. What was acceptable in one culture was unacceptable in another. Not like now, with the chairman overseeing things. Their internet was a lawless beast back then, and it profited those who knew how to best use that advantage. The debate over the use and policing of this internet was already raging when Urizen first floated the idea of the palm disc. They argued that since theft of the mobile devices caused security issues, financial mostly since people used their devices to access their money, but personal too, with intimate photos being stolen and released on their internet, the safest way to ensure people's security was to stop the devices from being able to be physically taken away, link them into our very DNA. Having the tech implanted would also make people more responsible for their words, and therefore less likely to bully others or incite violence, a real problem in the lawless days of anonymous internet postings. We're so lucky that they helped us quell those unsavoury aspects of our nature. Homo sapiens were a vile and violent bunch. There were rumours that they tested the first palm disc on animals and then on convicts. Do you remember Crime and Punishment from your download? Before finally floating the product. The company's staff members already had the palm discs installed and could all give testimonials that the product worked well, that they didn't inhibit the use of the hand, and indeed were even friendly to the environment as they were recharged by the body's own electrical charge, so there was no need for batteries. That was another hot topic of the day, my mother told me. We were, after all, a lot more dependent on the environment then. We used to go outside almost every day and had no control over the weather at all. Can you imagine? There was no longer any need for tedious searching for that song whose name you couldn't recall, for if you hummed a few bars, the song would play, note perfect, directly into your brain, and the details of the song, composer, writer, singer, instrumentalists, etc. would all be available to you. This was before Urizen perfected it, of course. Every piece of information would write itself into your brain, like your friend feed and your news feed do now in common tongue, but you'd have to read it. Things have come along much further now. Progress is the way of Homo digitalis. In the olden days, before Urizen, if you wanted a story about, I don't know, a mermaid and a hairpin, you'd either have to search for one or create it yourself. Can you imagine? If you wanted to know what life was like in one of the other cities, or even the more far-flung places, you'd have to read about them, find out, maybe even go there. I know it's difficult for you to understand, young one. These words are all from so very long ago, even I don't fully understand it. I'm just telling you what my mother told me. She said that just wondering was not enough to gain you knowledge. You had to learn, sometimes over and over again, before you could confidently recall information or a new skill. Now, of course, if I want to know what the weather's like in April today, I know that it's 11 degrees outside with a southerly wind and scattered showers before I even finish the thought. Some people resisted the idea of the palm disc. People always resist change, don't they? And the elite at the time were those who'd spent years gaining knowledge. Knowledge, of course, being power back then. And they were not happy about the democratization of learning. People were easier to control when they knew only a little. But of course, the resistors can't hold back the tide of progress. Soon every adult had been fitted with their personal palm disc, older children too. Different companies started to spring up with their own versions, but Urizen was by far the most popular, the original always being the best. They ran a competition. Your great-grandfather was one of the winners, not that he knew it at the time, and they gave out 10,000 palm discs to newborn babies. Of course now, disc fitting is as standard as cutting the umbilical cord, but parent groups at the time were outraged, and your great-grandfather's mother was even spat at on the street for allowing her baby to be fitted with the disc. People were convinced that the problems they had with the internet, most notably the unsuitable images, would transfer to the palm disc, exposing the babies to terrible peril. Urizen protects us, and of course they ensured that no such thing could be seen. The chairman would simply not allow it. They studied the 10,000 carefully, and 6 months after the first trial, they announced their findings. Before we had the palm discs, babies could not communicate at all. There's no need for that, look. I'm not telling you stories. Honestly, all they could do was cry, and the poor parents had to attempt to extrapolate from the tone, the time, and the duration of the cry what the infant's needs were. All very stressful and time-consuming. Now that the babies were connected, they had merely to think of sustenance and the caregiver would know immediately to feed them. They had but to feel tired and they would be put to bed. Their intelligence, when compared to other babies of their age without a palm disc, was astounding. Whilst non-palm babies could not even speak at 6 months, palm babies could hold and sometimes win entire debates on multiple subjects, sending thoughts directly to the sender. Within weeks of the findings being released, millions of parents turned up at Urizen offices around the world, demanding their babies be fitted with a disc. The government, the people who ran the country before Urizen, you remember from your history download? They were concerned that the poorer children might miss out, so Urizen made the basic fitting free, with apps and downloads costing extra. Even at the beginning, they have always looked after the people. We are so lucky to have Urizen. Demand surged, and the poorer people who had badly fitted palm discs fitted at cheaper imitation companies clamoured to have their old discs replaced with shiny new ones from Urizen. Within maybe 3 years of releasing its product, Urizen had a disc in almost every palm in the world. We use our discs to communicate, to learn, even to moralise and learn how to behave. Can you imagine what it was like for people in those dark ages, never truly knowing right from wrong, constantly having to decide for themselves? Thank goodness we have Urizen to keep us on the right track. We'd be lost without them. That is, of course, the real reason Urizen became leaders of the world, because we need them. Without them, we're animals in the dark, relying purely on ourselves for guidance. Can you imagine the loneliness people must have felt when there was only silence in their heads? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not for a second suggesting that the terrorist attack was a good thing, not at all. But without the virus, Urizen might not have come to power when they did, and who knows where we'd be now. It was a blessing in disguise. Urizen had been running for nearly a decade. We're already in a position of power, lobbying the government, richest company in the world, all of that. So when the virus struck, they were already positioned to help. I know there were conspiracy theories at the time, there always are of course, but I know the chairman would not put us in any danger, and nothing at Eurozone gets past him. The virus was truly terrifying. You'll understand more when you're a parent yourself. It only affected the children, you see. They went to bed as usual, palm discs glowing blue like little nightlights while the overnight downloads began. They were automatic by then. We'd pay a monthly fee and get our pre-scheduled downloads at night time. Palm discs were no longer the shiny new technology they'd once been. They were as commonplace as a tin opener by that point. I suppose had they been entirely new, we might have gone a different way completely, had them all removed and gone back to the inefficient data machines of old. But we were reliant by then. We didn't know how else to be. My mother told me about it. I was far too young to remember, but she said she never actually felt her blood freeze until that moment, thought it was just an expression. She'd gone to fetch me from my bed when I didn't respond to her message that I should come down for breakfast. I was lying there, palm disc glowing red instead of its usual blue. My eyes were open, but you couldn't see the colour in them, she said, nor the pupil, just a milky white glowing blue. I was buzzing, she told me, like an insect, and I didn't respond to her messages, didn't even respond when she spoke, touched me, shook me. She ran to get help from the neighbours and found the same story in every house on the street, every street in the town. Every child under 16 frozen in their beds, glowing blue, buzzing. The adult palm discs were still fully functioning, except that they wouldn't connect to the child's. My mother's an opinionated woman, always was, and she set off on the march, protesting and demanding help with all the other parents. The chairman came out personally then to address them, told them that it was a global problem, terrorist mind hackers were suspected, and that he would fix it personally. We were in suspended animation for over 24 hours, and my earliest memory is my mother sobbing hysterically, pulling me from my bed and holding me to her. I have that memory saved. I'll send it to you. I've set a reminder. Naturally, I couldn't understand why she was reacting like that. I had no idea what had happened, you see. We'd all just thought we'd been asleep. All of us. After the culprits had been found, they were tried for mind terrorism. Turned out to be a rival company trying to discredit Eurozone, Globolink I think they were called, working with a small group of anarchist anti-corporatists. The culprits were easy to catch. Every thought that they had ever had was stored on the Eurozone database. No need for inefficient, prejudiced police, outdated courts and corruptible juries. We had direct links to the thoughts of the hackers. We knew they were guilty. We weren't really using old-fashioned prisons then either. Usually people connected to the hive mind don't have criminal thoughts. The terrorists were stripped of their palm discs and exiled. Some people say that they live out in the world somewhere, that they breed and thrive, but it can't be so. How could you survive out there? No disc to tell you how to cook, what sustenance your body most needs. No disc to soothe you when you're sad, switch you into sleep when you're weary. No fertility boosters to help you have children. The survivors are a story, made up to frighten small children. You're too old for boogeymen now. We would still have accepted Eurozone as the world's leaders, of course we would have. But I often think that the virus, awful crime as it was, helped to get them into power. After the other companies were banned and disbanded, people soon realised there was no need for governments at all. Eurozone provide all we need to keep the peace and to prevent crime. We didn't need governments anymore. The people handed the power over to Eurozone, and we were all the better for it. Oh, I know you're getting sleepy now, Nana's little pixel. I can see your thoughts getting fuzzy round the edges. No, I'll send you those memories tomorrow. I've updated the reminder. Let me upload you a lullaby, my pretty rose, from my own memory banks. We can talk again when you're recharged. Don't worry your little head about viruses. They're a thing of the past. Eurozone takes care of us now. Eurozone keeps us safe. So I originally published that story in 2012, and as I say, I then decided that technology was catching up too quickly to me, and so I never actually published the story where Rose is also exiled, the little child that the nan is speaking to in there, and loses her ability to think completely. But maybe one day I will. Join me on Monday for my next vlog. Not quite sure, as usual, what I'm vlogging about yet. Might go and harass Sassy until she agrees to come on my channel and talk about her book, because that is due out on Saturday. But I might just take you on a little day out instead. If you can't wait until Monday to see me again, I understand. I will be here every single morning in your shorts, taking a great big deep breath, letting you know what I'm grateful for, sometimes letting you know what's challenging me that day. And I will also be here on a Witchy Wednesday doing an intuitive tarot card pull for you as well. Until then though, you have yourself a magical week.